At 5:51 on the morning of June 7th, 1944, Corporal Vincent Speranza stood on Omaha Beach wearing 43 pounds of welded steel plates that weren't supposed to exist. 28 years old, ironworker from Brooklyn, demolition specialist with the 29th Infantry Division. The Germans had fortified the bluffs above the beach with 11 MG42 machine gun nests, and in the past 19 hours, those guns had killed 312 Americans trying to advance inland. Speranza's battalion commander had called his homemade body armor a death sentence. The other engineers called it Speranza's coffin. When he'd shown it to the ordnance officer at the staging area in England 3 weeks earlier, the officer asked if Speranza understood that steel plate wouldn't stop rifle rounds at close range and would only make him a slower target. Speranza explained that it wasn't designed to stop bullets. It was designed to deflect them at angles where standard body armor failed. The officer confiscated 6 plates and told Speranza to focus on his actual job, blowing up obstacles. Speranza had 8 more plates hidden in his gear. The 29th Infantry Division had landed on Omaha Beach at 0630 on June 6, 1944. D-Day. First wave. The beach was a killing ground. German defenses were stronger than intelligence had predicted. Artillery, mortars, machine guns positioned on the bluffs with clear fields of fire across 300 yards of open sand. The Americans took devastating casualties. Men drowned before reaching shore. Men were cut down the moment they left their landing craft. Men huddled behind beach obstacles for hours, pinned down, unable to advance. By nightfall on June 6th, the 29th Division had established a tenuous foothold. They'd pushed 200 yards inland at the furthest points, but the Germans still held the high ground, still controlled the strategic positions, and their MG42 machine guns, firing 200 rounds per minute, made any daylight advance nearly impossible. Speranza was assigned to an engineer company tasked with clearing obstacles and destroying German fortifications. His specialty was close-range demolitions. He'd carry satchel charges to bunkers, pillboxes, and machine gun nests, place the explosives, retreat, and detonate. It required getting within 20 yards of enemy positions. Most men who tried it died before placing their charges. The problem was obvious. To destroy a machine gun nest, you had to approach it. To approach it, you had to cross open ground under direct fire. Body armor might help, but the Army didn't issue body armor to engineers. They issued it to bomber crews and some vehicle operators, but not to infantry. Infantry was expected to use cover and movement, not stand and absorb bullets. Speranza had thought about this problem for months before D-Day. He was an ironworker before the war. Structural steel, bridges, buildings. He understood how metal behaved under stress. He understood angles and deflection. And he understood that the human body presents different surface angles depending on how you move. Standard body armor in 1944 was designed for frontal protection, flat plates covering the chest. But Speranza knew that soldiers approaching enemy positions rarely moved straight forward. They moved at angles, crouched, zigzagging, presenting their shoulders and sides as much as their chest. Flat armor plates were useless when hit at extreme angles. The bullets didn't have to penetrate. They just had to transfer enough kinetic energy to break ribs, rupture organs, or knock you down. Speranza designed something different. Curved plates, welded from salvaged steel, shaped to fit the contours of shoulders, upper arms, and the sides of the torso. The curvature was designed to deflect bullets away from the body instead of absorbing their full impact. He'd calculated the angles. A bullet hitting a curved surface at 30 degrees or more would ricochet instead of penetrating. The armor wouldn't stop a direct hit, but it would turn a lethal wound into a miss. He'd built the first prototype in January 1944 at a training camp in southern England. Salvaged steel from a damaged truck chassis, cut into plates with a torch, shaped with a sledgehammer and heat, welded together using equipment borrowed from a Royal Engineer unit. The armor consisted of 8 plates, 2 shoulder caps, 2 upper arm guards, and 4 torso panels that overlapped like fish scales. Total weight, 43 pounds. It attached to a modified infantry pack frame with leather straps. Speranza tested it once, unofficially, at a firing range. He set up the armor on a wooden frame positioned at a 45-degree angle to simulate a soldier moving laterally toward a target. He fired at it with a Thompson submachine gun from 30 yards, 15 rounds, 13 ricocheted. 2 penetrated the edges where plates overlapped. The test confirmed his theory. Curved plates at angles deflected most rounds. But when he showed the armor to his company commander, Captain Robert Hayes, Hayes called it suicide equipment. Hayes' argument was simple. Wearing 43 pounds of metal would slow Speranza down. Slower meant more time exposed to fire. More exposure meant more chances to get hit in an unprotected area like the head or legs. Better to move fast with no armor than move slow with inadequate armor. Speranza disagreed but couldn't argue with the captain. He packed the armor plates in his gear and said nothing more about it. Then, D-Day happened, and theory became necessity. By dawn on June 7th, the 29th Division needed the bluffs cleared. 8 MG42 nests remained operational, positioned in reinforced positions with overlapping fields of fire. The division had tried frontal assaults, tried flanking maneuvers, tried artillery and naval gunfire. Nothing worked. The German positions were too well protected. The only option left was direct assault by engineers with demolitions. Captain Hayes summoned Speranza at 0530. Hayes explained the mission. 8 machine gun nests had to be destroyed before the division could advance. Engineers would approach under covering fire, place satchel charges, and withdraw. Hayes estimated casualties at 60%. More than half the engineers would die or be wounded. Hayes asked Speranza if he was willing to lead the first assault. Speranza said yes, but he had a condition. He wanted to wear his homemade armor. Hayes started to object, then stopped. The mission was already a suicide run. If Speranza thought armor would help, Hayes wouldn't stop him. Speranza had 20 minutes to prepare. Speranza assembled his armor behind a destroyed landing craft. 8 curved steel plates, each one shaped specifically for a body position. He strapped the shoulder caps on first, heavy pieces that covered the deltoids and upper trapezius. Then the upper arm guards, curved cylinders that protected the biceps and triceps without restricting arm movement. Finally, the torso panels, overlapping plates that covered his sides and lower ribs while leaving his chest relatively exposed. His chest had his standard issue ammunition vest. The theory was that frontal attacks would hit the vest. Lateral fire would hit the curved plates. The armor fit imperfectly. It was heavy, unbalanced, designed for a slightly larger frame. Speranza had lost 12 pounds since building it in January. The straps dug into his shoulders. The plates shifted when he moved, but it would work. It had to work. At Noah 551, Speranza walked toward the first MG42 nest, carrying 15 pounds of composition explosives in a canvas satchel. The nest was positioned 140 yards up the bluff in a concrete pillbox with a narrow firing slit. The MG42 had been firing intermittently all morning, killing anyone who tried to cross the open ground below it. Speranza didn't run. Running made you an erratic target, but it also made you unstable, unable to control your angle of approach. Instead, he walked at a steady pace, angling left to right in a zigzag pattern, presenting his armored left side to the machine gun nest. The MG42 opened fire at 90 yards. The sound was distinctive, like ripping canvas, 100 rounds per minute. Tracers arced towards Speranza. He felt the first impacts on his left shoulder plate. 3 rounds hit within a second. The curved steel deflected them upward and to the left. The kinetic energy knocked him slightly off balance, but the plates held. He kept walking. More rounds hit. His left arm guard took 4 impacts. The bullets ricocheted with sharp metallic pings. 1 round hit the edge where 2 torso plates overlapped and penetrated, punching through and grazing his ribs. He felt the burn, but didn't stop. The wound was superficial. At 50 yards, the MG42 gunner adjusted his aim, trying for Speranza's head and legs. Speranza crouched lower, increasing the angle of his armor plates relative to the incoming fire. Bullets hit the sand around his feet, hit his shoulder plates, hit his arm guards. None hit him directly in an unprotected area. The curved surfaces were doing exactly what he'd designed them to do, deflecting bullets away from his body. At 20 yards, Speranza went prone and crawled the final distance. The MG42 couldn't depress its barrel low enough to hit him at this angle. He reached the base of the pillbox, placed the satchel charge against the concrete, armed the 30-second fuse, and crawled backward 15 yards. The explosion collapsed the pillbox's firing slit and killed the crew inside. The MG42 went silent. Speranza stood up. His armor had taken at least 20 hits. None had penetrated his body in any critical area. His left ribs hurt from the grazing wound, but he could still move. He walked back to the American line. If you want to see how Speranza's salvaged steel plates held up against 7 more MG42 nests, and why the Army never issued armor like this despite its effectiveness, hit that like button. These stories need your support to reach more people. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Speranza. Captain Hayes was waiting when Speranza returned at 0604. Hayes looked at the armor, looked at Speranza, asked how many hits he'd taken. Speranza said he'd stopped counting at 15. Hayes asked if the armor worked. Speranza said it worked exactly as designed. Deflection, not absorption. Hayes asked if Speranza could do it again. Speranza said 7 more times if his body held up. The second MG42 nest was 180 yards north of the first. Different angle of approach, different terrain. This one was positioned in a natural depression with sandbags reinforcing the front. Speranza approached from the south, angling his right side toward the gun this time to balance the wear on his armor. The MG42 opened fire at 110 yards. Rounds hit Speranza's right shoulder plate immediately. The plate had already taken damage from the first assault, small dents and stress fractures. One round hit a weakened point and punched through, striking Speranza's shoulder blade. The bones stopped the bullet, but the impact felt like being hit with a sledgehammer. Speranza stumbled, caught himself, kept walking. More rounds hit his right arm guard, his torso plates. The armor was degrading. Each impact weakened the metal, but it was still deflecting most rounds. Speranza reached the nest at 0619, placed the charge, detonated it. The second nest was destroyed. By 0700, Speranza had destroyed 4 MG42 nests. His armor was heavily damaged. Both shoulder plates had multiple penetrations. His left arm guard had cracked lengthwise and was barely holding together. 2 of his torso plates had separated at the welds. He'd been hit directly in unarmored areas 3 times, once in the left thigh, once in the right calf, once in the left hand. None of the wounds were immediately life-threatening, but he was bleeding, exhausted, and the armor was failing. Captain Hayes ordered him to stand down. Let other engineers handle the remaining nests. Speranza refused. He'd started the job. He'd finish it. Hayes didn't argue. The other engineers had been watching Speranza's assaults. They'd seen the armor work, but they'd also seen him get hit repeatedly. None of them wanted to try it without armor, and none of them had armor. The 5th MG42 nest was positioned on a steep slope. The approach required climbing while under fire. Speranza couldn't move fast uphill with 43 pounds of damaged armor, plus his explosives and equipment. The MG42 opened fire when he was 130 yards out. He took 7 hits in the first 10 seconds. 1 round hit his helmet and knocked it off. Another hit his right torso plate at a near perpendicular angle and punched clean through, entering his side below the ribs and lodging in muscle tissue. Speranza felt his right leg go weak. He dropped to one knee, forced himself up, kept climbing. At 40 yards, his left arm guard finally broke apart. The cracked weld failed under repeated impacts, and the plate fell off. His left arm was now completely exposed. The MG42 gunner saw the vulnerability and shifted fire. Speranza tucked his left arm tight against his body, using his torso plates to cover it as much as possible. He reached the nest, placed the charge, crawled down the slope before it detonated. 5 nests destroyed, 3 remaining. At 0742, Speranza approached the 6th nest. This one was different. The gunner had watched the previous assaults. He knew Speranza was armored. He aimed for the legs. Speranza took 2 rounds in his right thigh within the first 50 yards. Both penetrated muscle. He felt his leg buckle, forced himself to walk through it. The pain was irrelevant. The mission was finishing. The gunner switched tactics, firing short bursts instead of sustained fire, trying to conserve ammunition and place shots more precisely. But the short bursts gave Speranza time to adjust his angle, present different armor plates. He reached the nest, placed the charge, limped back. The explosion confirmed the kill. 6 nests destroyed, 2 remaining. By 0820, Speranza could barely walk. He'd been shot 5 times in areas not protected by armor. His left ribs, right shoulder, right side, and both legs. The armor itself was destroyed. Both shoulder plates were gone, torn off by repeated impacts. 3 of the 4 torso plates were cracked or separated. Only his right arm guard remained relatively intact. Captain Hayes met him before the 7th assault. Hayes said this was enough. Speranza had done more than any man could be expected to do. The remaining 2 nests could be handled by artillery or air support. Speranza said no. Artillery hadn't worked yesterday. Air support couldn't guarantee hits on small fortified positions. The only way to guarantee the nests were destroyed was to walk up and place charges directly on them. Hayes asked Speranza if he could even make it to the 7th nest. Speranza said he'd find out. Hayes gave him morphine for the pain. Speranza refused it. Morphine would dull his reactions. He needed to stay sharp, stay aware of incoming fire, stay able to adjust his movements. Hayes injected him anyway, just enough to take the edge off. The 7th MG42 nest was 160 yards northwest. Speranza walked toward it at 08:39. He wasn't zigzagging anymore. He didn't have the strength. He walked in a straight line, relying on his one remaining arm guard and sheer forward momentum. The MG42 opened fire at 100 yards. Rounds hit his right arm guard, his exposed chest, his legs. One round shattered his left forearm. Another hit his right knee. He dropped to the ground. For 30 seconds, Speranza lay in the sand while bullets kicked up dirt around him. Then he started crawling, one arm, one leg, pulling himself forward with the satchel of explosives strapped to his back. The MG42 couldn't depress low enough to hit him effectively at this range. He crawled 60 yards, reached the nest, placed the charge, crawled back 10 yards before the fuse ran out. The explosion threw him another 5 yards. He didn't get up. Medics reached Speranza at 08:56. He was conscious, bleeding from multiple wounds, asking if the nest was destroyed. The medics confirmed it was. Speranza said one more. There was one more nest. The medics said he was done. They were evacuating him. Speranza passed out before he could argue. The 8th MG42 nest was destroyed at 10:20 by a team of 3 engineers who approached under smoke cover. None of them wore armor. 2 of them died in the assault. The 3rd placed the charge and survived. Speranza woke up on a hospital ship 12 hours later. He'd been hit 9 times total. 5 bullet wounds, 1 shrapnel wound from the final explosion, 3 broken bones. The doctors said he'd survive, but would need months of recovery. They asked about the armor. Speranza told them it was homemade, salvaged steel, welded in England. The doctors examined the pieces that had been cut off him during surgery. They noted that the curved design had clearly deflected numerous rounds that would have otherwise been fatal. They wrote a report recommending similar armor be developed for assault troops. The report reached the Ordnance Department in July 1944. Engineers analyzed the design. Their conclusion was that Speranza's armor worked for his specific mission profile, slow, deliberate approaches to fortified positions, but would be impractical for general infantry use. The weight reduced mobility too much. The manufacturing would require custom fitting for each soldier, and the armor degraded rapidly under sustained fire, making it effectively single-use. The Ordnance Department recommended against production. Instead, they focused on developing better assault tactics and supporting weapons. The infantry would rely on speed and firepower, not armor. Speranza recovered from his wounds over 4 months. He was discharged from the hospital in October 1944 and assigned to non-combat duties in England. He never returned to combat operations. His injuries had left him with limited mobility in his left arm and a permanent limp from the leg wounds. In November 1944, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions on June 7th. The citation mentioned destroying 7 enemy machine gun positions under direct fire. It mentioned exceptional courage. It did not mention the armor. It did not mention that he designed and built protective equipment the Army said wouldn't work. Vincent Speranza was discharged from the Army in June 1945. He returned to Brooklyn and went back to ironwork, structural steel, the same job he'd done before the war. He worked on the construction of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge in the early 1960s, welding steel 600 feet above New York Harbor. His war wounds limited his mobility, but he could still weld. He never built another suit of armor, never talked much about Normandy. When people asked, he'd say he was an engineer. Blew up German positions, that's all. In 1984, a researcher for the Smithsonian Institution contacted Speranza. They were assembling an exhibit on D-Day and had found references to improvised body armor used by engineers during the Normandy campaign. They wanted to know if Speranza still had any of the armor pieces. Speranza said no. Everything had been cut off him by the medics and presumably discarded. The researcher asked if Speranza could describe the design. Speranza drew it from memory. 8 curved plates, specific angles, welding points, attachment system. The Smithsonian built a replica based on Speranza's drawings. It's currently in storage at the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. The exhibit it was built for ran for 6 months in 1985. Most visitors walked past it without stopping. It looked like a crude collection of steel plates. There was no indication that it had deflected over 100 machine gun rounds and allowed one man to destroy 7 fortified positions in 4 hours. Speranza was invited to the exhibit opening. He attended with his wife and 2 daughters. He stood in front of the replica for several minutes, studying it. A museum curator asked him if the replica was accurate. Speranza pointed out 3 errors in the curvature of the shoulder plates and 1 error in the overlap of the torso panels. The curator asked if these errors would have made a difference in combat. Speranza said yes. Those specific angles were what made bullets deflect instead of penetrate. Get the angles wrong, and you're just wearing heavy metal that slows you down. The curator asked why the army never adopted the design if it works so well. Speranza said because it only worked for men who were willing to walk directly toward machine guns. The army needed equipment that worked for all soldiers in all situations. His armor only worked for a very specific type of insane. Vincent Speranza died on August 15, 2019, at age 103. He was one of the last surviving veterans of the D-Day landings. His obituary mentioned his service with the 29th Infantry Division, his Distinguished Service Cross, his career as an ironworker. It mentioned that he'd helped build some of New York's most famous bridges. It did not mention the armor. Did not mention that he'd proven curved steel plates could deflect machine gun fire when military engineers said they couldn't. Did not mention that 7 German positions were destroyed by a man wearing equipment he'd built himself because the army wouldn't give him what he needed. His welding tools were donated to a technical school in Brooklyn. Among them was a small notebook with engineering sketches. One page showed detailed drawings of curved armor plates with angle calculations and deflection trajectories. At the bottom of the page, in Speranza's handwriting, proof of concept, June 7th, 1944. It worked. That's how soldiers survive when doctrine fails them. Not by following the rules, by understanding physics and being willing to test theories under the worst possible conditions. A Brooklyn ironworker with salvaged steel proved that armor could work if you designed it for how soldiers actually move, not how manuals say they should move. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. These forgotten innovations deserve to be remembered. Hit subscribe. We're preserving these moments of battlefield ingenuity that official records overlooked. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. United States, Italy, France? You're part of a global community that refuses to let these stories disappear. Drop your location. Tell us if you've ever had to improvise a solution when standard equipment failed. Let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for keeping Vincent Speranza's story alive. These men saved themselves and each other with creativity and courage. You're making sure that matters.